Alrighty, hello everybody. Promise you, I'm sure at some point we'll get to meet each other in person. It's kind of the third or fourth time we've all been on here, and it's still via Zoom. So at some point we will get together. So today I thought we accomplished kind of what we thought we could accomplish getting into really the second signing day of the signing period. As I when I came on board, with 19 players already signed, we really tried to do a thorough job of trying to assess our roster as best we could, of looking at the game tape of currently what we had, getting an idea of kind of the movement skills of our players on the field and maybe where they would fit scheme-wise now that we have our coaching staff on board, and then identify the players that were really available, that we felt like could help the University of Texas, not only on the football field, in the classroom, and from a character standpoint of what they meant moving forward of representing the university. So clearly, when you really just kind of look, I think the couple positions that should jump out to everybody. One is that defensive end outside linebacker position. And we really went there first with Ray Thornton as a grad transfer from LSU. And bringing him on board, a guy I competed against the last 2 years. The versatility he brings, the pass rush ability, we feel like is somewhere we can really kind of uplift the roster. A guy who's got championship pedigree at LSU from a couple years ago, really good third down pass rusher. So we tried to address that early on, and then to get a David Abiara, 6'4", 245-pound defensive end that we really believe can grow into a 265-pound type defensive end, 270-pound defensive end, but also shows some versatility as a stand-up defensive end off of his high school tape. I think that the key to the drill there is understanding our style of play and Coach Kwiatkowski's style of play when he was at Washington, that hybrid defensive end that can play defensive end or stand-up outside linebacker is a big component to generating the pass rush, but also the versatility. So addressing those two. And then Ishmael Ibrahim, clearly 6'1" corner. In our conference in the Big 12 and in any league, you got to have cover corners, and he clearly can do that. But I think the one thing that jumps out with Ish is the physicality that he plays with. When you watch his tape, he's a tremendous tackler. He can get off blocks, and in this day and age of the bubble screens and the quick screens, your corners have to have the ability to tackle, not just cover. But again, I like to liken everything back to what Coach Kwiatkowski had done at Washington and how many of those long corners they had at Washington that are now on and playing in the NFL. I think he's a great scheme fit for us, as well as kind of just a fit from a body length, style of play standpoint, really big to us. And then Keithron Lee, I really view him as a slot type receiver for us. I think this guy's got a real high football IQ. All of the gadget type plays, the jet sweeps, the bubbles, those things stand out. But when you really start digging into the tape on him, his ability to adjust on the football down the field is something that's been very impressive to me. He's got tremendous hand-eye coordination. He can make plays on the ball. He wins one-on-ones. So again, I think when you look at those key components, we got kind of a versatile, kind of a slot receiver. We got a really good cover corner, okay, and we got two defensive end, outside backer type body types to fit us. Now, clearly what happened for us here is we didn't want to reach too far and just fill up all of our numbers. So that allowed us here, we've really got 4 spots still available for us. And in the nature of college football right now, with the transfer portal and the things going on and a potential one-time transfer rule coming down the road, we wanted to make sure we left ourselves enough wiggle room and versatility to get through spring ball and maybe address a few more needs that may come down the road. So, ideally, you come in at the front end and you sign all, 25 of your guys and away you go. This was obviously clearly a unique situation with the signing period where 19 kids were already signed, which we feel very good about. We think they're going to be good additions to the program. Now, what do you do with those last few spots, knowing the majority of the players are off the board and they're already signed and going to other schools? So all in all, I thought we did a really good job on the 21 class, leaving us some wiggle room and filling some needs. But I think the other key component, which I thought our staff has done a tremendous job of up until this point, is not playing from behind in the 22 and in the 23 class. We gave that a lot of focus as well so that we could be up to speed today with the other schools around the country of our evaluation process, getting our board in order, ranking our players where we like them, and then putting the emphasis on the guys that we feel good about moving forward into 22.
Thank you, Coach. You guys can go ahead and start using the raise hand function, and we'll roll through some questions. We'll start with Brian.
Hey, Steve. That was actually what I was curious about is going forward. Transition classes are always a mixed bag. Who knows how this is all going to turn out? But how focused are you on laying the groundwork for many recruiting classes to come? Moncrief is getting done. You're establishing the personnel department. Just how important is that in your priority system of building forward?
Well, I think it's a big deal, and I want to make sure I'm clear on something that to me is very important. We have to be the best developmental staff in the country. And that was part of the process in hiring the coaches that we hired, and their track record and their history and their ability to coach and develop players. For two reasons. One, on signing day, everybody loves their signing class, right? Everybody signs and talks up the 4 and 5 stars, and everybody feels good on signing date. It doesn't matter if you're ranked number 1 or number 30. Everybody feels good, but at the end of the day, they really should rank signing classes 3 years later, right? What happened to those players 3 years later? That's the key component for us. And when you talk about development, we've got a lot of work to do in developing the players on our current roster. We've got a lot of work in developing the players that we just signed, of the 23 players we just signed. That's where we can really increase, the value of our team and our ability to play here moving forward into the years to come. Now, on the back end of that, you're exactly right. Now it's really setting the stage for what do we want to do in the 22 class? What do we want to do in the 23 class? What do we want this roster to look like, and really start to shape it and tailor it to exactly what we feel. But we can't neglect what we have now, and we can't neglect what we just signed. I mean, these are key components to the success moving forward of our program. So there would be a huge emphasis placed on that, just so everybody's on the same page with our approach to this.
Hey, guys, just so that we can get through as many as possible, just a reminder to keep it to one question each time. Go ahead, Bob, you're next.
Yeah, Coach, I'm just kind of curious what you're hearing from families of recruits as you're not just from 21, but as you start moving forward into 22 and 23. What are some of the things you're hearing, both good and bad, about the University of Texas and your vision for the program?
Well, I think one of the key components here for us is, I'm a relationship guy. I really like developing personal relationships with the recruit, with the family, with the coach. And I think people really appreciate that. I think this day and age of recruiting via social media, via the internet, which is a lot of what is going on out there now, when we're taking a little bit of a different approach, which is a very personal approach, and getting connected and getting to know the recruits, and trusting our evaluation, not what's getting said on the internet about a player. And when you can really talk about the player and his evaluation and why we like him and what are maybe some things to work on, I really think people take that to heart. I think that they appreciate that kind of honesty and relationship-based kind of style of recruiting. So I do think that is something that we're hearing as a positive. The negative is we're new, right? And we're just getting on board, and what's it going to look like? And so that's our job now, to make sure that what we are talking about, right, what we're selling, is exactly the product that we're putting on the field. And so that'll take us a little bit of time, but at the end of the day, if we do it the right way, the results should be the results.
Chuck, go ahead.
Steve, it's always hard coming in, new coach, new staff, but what are the special challenges on hitting the ground running with the limitations created by the pandemic, where you don't have that in-person contact and you aren't seeing these guys, and how did you try to overcome it and laying that groundwork?
Well, I think we leaned on kind of our previous recruiting that we had been doing at our various spots. Clearly we had hired some coaches with some strong ties to the state of Texas, which was primarily our focus in this class and moving forward. And so you rely on the relationships that those coaches had at the schools and the coaches that they've been working with, and or prior relationships with potential recruits. I think that was the first and foremost thing that we were doing. And, really this entire recruiting calendar has been done via COVID. There's been no official visits. There have been no unofficial visits since last March. So really a lot of what we've done has been via video and via phone. And moving forward, I think if there's one assessment for us now that we really got to go to another level with is, I don't know what's going to happen with COVID. I don't know if anybody does, but we have to plan on it not going away too soon. So from a virtual tour type standpoint, getting the real, feel for the campus here at Texas and being in Austin, for the kids that can't get here and get on campus, we have to generate that feel via video, whether it's virtual tours, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's Zoom, whatever those things are. The focus has shifted some in recruiting. So we have to adapt with the times and go to another space that I think can make these kids and their families feel comfortable, not only with us as individuals, but the campus here at UT.
Roger, go ahead.
Coach, I don't know if it's like getting on a bicycle again, but, for so many years recently, you've been probably more concentrated on the offensive side of the ball, your position. Now back to, kind of the buck stops here, knowing that your coaches are responsible as well. What's that been like the last few weeks, getting back into that last decision maker?
I loved it. I'll be quite frank with you. I've loved it. It's when you're an assistant, you always sit there in the back of your head and you think, I'd take that guy or I wouldn't take that guy, right? And but you don't really have that choice. And now you do. And I think the one thing we really try to pride ourselves on is our evaluation process, whether it's the position coach, the area coach, the coordinator, and then me. And really going through the evaluation process, is he a fit? And at the end of the day, coming together and saying, let's try to go get this kid, or no, maybe not right now, or you know what, he's just not a fit for us. He's a good player, he's not a fit for us. And those are the calls you got to make. But at the end of the day, like in my opinion, we've hired a tremendous staff. I really love their evaluation of kids. We know what we're looking for by position specific, and then do they meet the traits, right? The position traits and qualities that we're looking for. And if they're short somewhere, is that something that we can develop them into, where maybe they are a little short in a certain area, but man, if we can develop him, he can get there. And so those are all the discussions you have. I know a style of defensive player when I see it that I'm looking for. And then especially you start drilling down by position specific, I think then it all comes to light and it's pretty clear what we're trying to get done when you get there.
Herc, you're up.
Yes, Steve. When you evaluate the roster that you have along with these signees, where do you feel like you're the strongest right now, and where do you feel you're the thinnest and going to need area to upgrade next recruiting class?
Well, I would say probably two things on the offensive side of the ball. Clearly, we have a lot of depth at the wide receiver position, and really now at the tight end position coming out of this class. So that side of it on offense, I think, is a very deep position. On the offensive line, we really only signed 2 kids in this class. We've had a little bit of attrition in the portal. So I do think moving forward, that is going to be a position that we're really going to have to focus on in the 22 class, so which we're comfortable doing. We'll be okay there of getting that done. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, I'm not as comfortable with the depth right now at the inside linebacker position. I do think there's quality players. I'm not talking quality of players. I'm talking more just sheer depth. Because when you look at that position generally on your roster, not only are they players on defense, those guys make up a lot of your special teams, right? They're your guys that are on the punt team, the kickoff return team. So there's a lot of value in that position from an overall team standpoint. And then clearly, a little bit where we got hit in the portal was at the corner position. So, in my opinion, you can never have enough guys that can run and cover in the back end. So, all in all, those are to highlight a few positions. But the reality of it is, we need to continue to build our roster, kind of simultaneously keep developing not just depth but the quality of players needed to be a team that we all want to be, for the next 1, 2, 7, 10 years, and that takes time and consistency to get that done.
Chip, go ahead.
Steve, do you feel like you know what you have at quarterback, or is that a position you'd be looking in the portal as well?
I feel pretty good at this point, Chip. I mean, I haven't seen him throw a ball live, which is a little concerning for a guy that, I'm a quarterback guy. But, I do like the maturity of Casey. I like what he brought in the game. You got a pretty good feel. We've obviously dug into a lot of practice tape. I like the skill set of Hudson Card. I think that he is a really talented player, and you see that when you dig into the practice. So I think we've got two kind of frontline guys to start the process, and then bringing in Charles here, and then what we end up doing moving forward in the 22 and 23 class. But I don't know if the days of when you got 5 quarterbacks on your roster, I don't know if those are going to exist anymore in college football. The idea of the quarterback recruitment, the idea of the transfer portal now at that position, the guys just don't stick around as long. And so you got to be prepared to really work with 2, 3 maybe, develop them, and get them to a point to where you feel good about it. So in that case, looking around the country and at where we're at, I feel good about the position. But I got to wrap my brain around this isn't 6, 7 years ago when you had 4 or 5 guys on your roster at that position. They just don't stick around. You got to be ready to work with 2 or 3.
Danny Davis, go ahead.
Steve, as a head coach, how much weight do you believe in throwing behind your walk-on program? Is that a priority for you?
Yes, it is. I think it's a big priority, and I think we've done some things here at the university to try to enhance that. I think it is something that when you start talking about building a team, and when you've got a quality walk-on program, and you've got players that are putting in the work, that are paying their own way, that are helping the team, whether it's on game day, actually getting real game time reps, or throughout the week preparing for the game, that the starters start to recognize and respect that. And when then that mutual respect occurs, that's when you really got a great locker room. That's when you got a great team. And the quality of the walk-on player enhances that, right? Because the player knows that the starter may know that, hey, this guy's giving me a great rep. He got me ready to play Saturday, and I owe a lot to him for that. And so the better the quality of the walk-on, the better look we're getting, and or that kid's now earning himself on the special teams or on the field, then that generates a lot of respect amongst your team. And so those are the things we're trying to do. We're trying to close the gap there. And I think we're off to a pretty good start first time through of trying to address the kind of that priority walk-on program and really getting quality players in here.
Nick Moyle, you're up.
Yeah, Steve, you come to a place where 18 guys are already signed. You have a few more guys waiting to sign today. So how do you go about establishing a relationship with guys who had committed to play for head coaches not there anymore, and a lot of coaches who are mostly gone now? I mean, how do you go about building those relationships compared to starting a totally new relationship with a recruit?
Well, you do it by as best face-to-face contact as you can. You make it a point to call each and every one of them. You try to get on FaceTime. You try to get on Zoom. You try to meet their parents. You try to give them a feel for who you are, what you're about. Then you transition it to the position coach, right? He's starting that process. That's the way it is. But unfortunately, it's been this way for months now in recruiting. And, they made the commitment and they signed with the University of Texas. We wanted to reassure them that they had a home here, that this is this was going to be the place that they were going to call home when they went to college. And then this was our plan. This is our approach. This is who we are, broad scope of style of play, philosophy, who we are as people. So I don't want to say we were re-recruiting, but I do think it is fair and important to them to get to know us about what we're about. Because at the end of the day, this is a life-changing decision for them that they felt they should feel good about doing, and I think we did a really good job of that. I think all the kids that signed in December feel great about being here. The ones that are already here that were mid-years, we met with them in person, and then the ones that haven't graduated yet that are coming this summer, making contact with all of them. And all in all, I think the response has been great. And so onward and upward, that's kind of the approach that we have.
Anwar Richardson, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. I was curious, about recruiting quarterbacks for you in the future. Some kids want to be the only kid that's taken in the class. Some are okay with having, two in a class. I'm just kind of curious as to what your philosophy will be. Is that a year by year, especially, going into like the 2022 class?
It's definitely a year-by-year basis. The quarterback position is like every other, to where you got ideal numbers that you're looking for based on grades of where kids are in school, to making sure you've got good balance in the room. There's years when you do take two, and there's years when you're only taking the one. And I think one of the key components to that is being upfront and being honest. That's something we try to pride ourselves on being with all of our recruits, and quarterbacks are no different. When you're upfront, when you're honest, and you tell them your plan, then I think everybody can get on a common ground and understand what you're doing. I've taken two before in a class. I've taken one before in a class. But generally speaking, at that position, we get pretty fine-tuned down into, I don't recruit a million quarterbacks at a time. We do our evaluation. We pare it down pretty tight. We got a pretty good idea of the guys that we're really considering, and if they decided to come, we'd be excited to have them, and you move forward. And I think, but being honest with them with the numbers that you have, so they're aware of the situation, is the key to the drill.
Cedric Golden, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, I know this generation of kids are very comfortable social media, and they've never been fans of meeting in person, face to face. COVID won't be around forever, but how is going through this pandemic with the unique recruiting challenges, how is that going to change the game moving forward? Because I think it's forever changed.
Well, I agree with you. I think on a lot of fronts, this has changed the game, how we coach, how we teach, how we recruit. I think what it does, it costs money to go see schools. And yes, kids get 5 official visits and they try to take advantage of them. But a lot of what happens nowadays too is these kids are taking unofficial visits, and they're trying to drive or fly to schools and not burn that official visit. I think what this virtual world of recruiting has done for us has put us in a space to maybe save a little money for the recruits. Maybe clean up the recruiting game a little bit, maybe some of the question marks of how kids are getting to these campuses, and now it can clean up a little of, hey, this is how we're going to show you from afar, and then when you can get here, this is what it will be, so you can create some familiarity that way. And the reality of it all is, it's still about the personal relationships, right? It's still about making that connection. And, whether it's FaceTime, Zoom, whatever that is, just how we are right here, right now, we all want to be in the same room. But, man, we're pretty dang close right now. I'm seeing all the faces, right? We're making this connection. And that's really no different than recruiting. So moving forward, how many press conferences are going to be in person? How many are going to be on Zoom? What's the setting? I think recruiting is going to kind of be almost along those same lines.
Jeff Howe, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, with the offensive line specifically, I was wondering if you could maybe go through the process of, when you and Coach Flood sit down to evaluate a guy, kind of what you're looking for in your working relationship with him. How does that help you not just get the right lineman to fit what you want to do offensively, but in terms of player development, the whole deal, just with the offensive line process with Coach Flood?
Right. I think one thing about the offensive lineman, there's real specific positions generally in football that I think are a lot easier to play early, right? To play as true freshmen, right? You see a lot more kind of running backs or wide receivers, or you see corners, safeties maybe, or maybe a defensive end. Those guys have a tendency to play a little early, maybe a defensive tackle. I think at the offensive line position, because of the body type, because of the maturity, we have to forecast a little bit more, right? You have to look at down the road from a developmental standpoint. When you're starting 5 guys on the offensive line, very rarely are you starting 2 or 3 true freshmen on that offensive line at the start of a season, right? You may have one. You may have one that shows up halfway through the year. You may have one by the end of it. You may have none, right? So you have to think down the road when you start looking at the offensive line position. How big are his hands? How long are his arms, right? Can he bend it? Can he bend at the waist? Can he does he bend at the knees? What's his ankle flexion look like? Does he have power? Does he have room? Maybe he's a 275-pound kid coming out of high school, but his growth potential is 315, 320. Maybe he's a 350 kid. Can he lose the weight to get down to 320? So there's a lot of pieces to what is he going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, that help us shape the decision in that. And it's a delicate one. I think recruiting offensive line is a really delicate task, because when you miss, it's hard. And if you miss a few different times, now all of a sudden that room isn't looking like the way you want it to look. And so I think Coach Flood's the best in the world at doing it in college football. And, I trust his eye. I have a pretty good idea what I look for. And then we put our ideas together and we start formulating that board and then going after the guys that we want.
Scott Ebert, you're up.
Yeah, hey, Steve. Just wondering what you've seen from Ja'Tavion Sanders on film, and if you've had any conversations about what side of the ball he'll start on when he gets to campus.
Yeah, I've known JT for a while. He's a tremendous player, very versatile player, as everybody well knows. And we've definitely had dialogue. He's a guy who's a tremendous defensive end. I mean, he can rush the passer. He has all the skill set to rush. And then you look at him on offense at the tight end position, he's a real difference maker. He can win one-on-one matchups. He can separate. He's got great ball skills. So, we've talked about it. We're going to look at him at both, quite frankly. By the time he gets here, we're already going to be out of spring ball, so we're going to have a little better idea of our own roster. But as we get through it, like I said to him, my job is to put him in the best position to have success and to be successful. So whichever side of the ball that is first, we will do. That does not mean whichever side he starts on first that he's not going to play on the other side, because I owe it to him to give him the best opportunity to be successful. So he will get a look at both sides of the ball. I'm not discounting that he won't have a role on both sides of the ball, but we need to identify what will be best for him first and then maneuver him to the other side of the ball when the time is right.
Got time for two last ones, starting with Chip.
Steve, you mentioned the walk-on program, and Bob Shipley, had been working in that area. Do you see him staying on, or what's his status?
Well, Bob, I think we're in a little bit of a transition stage. I think he's still going to be part of the program in the exact capacity yet. We don't know. Bob's been a tremendous resource for me since coming on board, and I really value, what he brings to the program. So as we work our way through it, we'll get to a point that Bob will definitely have a role in the program. To what extent, still remains to be seen, excuse me.
Ryan, go ahead.
Steve, just one more roster question. You mentioned watching the practice tape. I'm curious now, what did you see? Did you see a team that you thought, hey, we can work with this? Or were you more concerned than you thought you'd be?
No, I like our football team. I think when you go through the game tape, and then you get into the practice tape of our point of attack tapes on very specific players. We do a tape on every kid that gives me a chance to watch each kid individually as opposed to as a whole. I think we've got good talent on this team. I think we have good leadership on this team, and I think we have good young talent on this team. And the reality of it is, for me, when I watch the tape, we finished 7-3 a year ago, right? We lose in overtime to Oklahoma. We turn the ball over inside the 5 against TCU, and we don't make a kick there at the end against Iowa State, or in a blink you're 10-0, right? But also we won a couple other games in overtime that in a blink we're 5-5. So there's a fine line in here with our roster. Probably the one thing that jumped out to me, that for me philosophically from the head coach's perspective, is getting our team to understand it's not about the opponent. It's not about the moment, if it's big or small. It's playing to the best of our ability, or as close to the best of our ability every time we take the field. And that's being the best version of ourselves every day, regardless of the opponent, regardless of the moment. And that'll put us in the best position to gain the results that we want. And I felt like at times maybe that didn't show up for these guys for whatever reason, but now that's my task to try to get that resolved.
Got one last question. Roger, go ahead.
Hey, Steve, I'm curious about having the early enrollees. Every guy on campus face-to-face has got to help to, build relationships along with the guys that are here. How important is it for as many guys as you have to be in front of the staff?
Well, it's great, and we really just started getting into it now from a position meeting standpoint and getting them tied into their position coaches. Next week, we will really start to kick into that even more. I wanted to give Coach Becton and our strength and conditioning staff some time to start to work with the players, and we've obviously been observing those workouts. But next week now we'll start to dig into them more from a football standpoint as we start to transition to get ourselves ready for spring ball in about a month and a half or so.
Actually, one final one. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve. Apologize if I missed this. I had to duck out briefly, but you referenced spring ball. In terms of the pandemic, dealing with that in the spring and maybe adjusting the spring game so you might have a chance to have recruits and fans at that game. How are you looking at that yet? Have you made any decisions?
Yes, I have. So we're going to start spring ball the Tuesday after spring break on the 23rd of March. So we really pushed this thing back, a pretty fair amount back, kind of assessing. I wanted to give Torrey Becton and his staff enough time to work the off-season conditioning program with our players. B, I wanted to give us enough time to get to know our players and get in with them. And then what that allowed us, pushing that all the way back to there, we can now go for 5 weeks. We can practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays throughout spring practice so that we can really have a really good practice. We can have a day in between to assess that film, then come back and have another really good practice, so on and so forth. That in and of itself then would push the spring game back there. I think it's April, might be the 24th or something like that, towards the end of April. How that's all going to play out, I don't know. All right, whether we can have fans, we can't have fans, but at the end of the day, it's about us building our team, right? Developmental process in the weight room, right? A really good scheme implementation and developmental spring, and then hopefully we can have a nice, kind of game there at the end where the fans can come kind of see the product of where we're at and the progress we've made. If they don't allow us to do it, maybe we can air it or whatever that is, just to give our guys a chance to kind of show the work that they've put in up until that point.